Internet, welcome to part 4 in the Road to Victory series, where we chronicle the winning journeys of every champion in Big Brother. From Season 2 to Season 25, we are now reaching the halfway point in the series. Half the winners are about to be covered, and if you want to watch the previous 3 videos, I will link them below in the description. And I gotta say, we have a pretty interesting trio on our hands. This is when I first started getting into Big Brother myself, so I guess we're trekking backwards into a familiar territory. From my perspective as a newbie just getting into the show, I thought the feed concept, just watching these players live, was absolutely wild. And then I went into the forums and everyone was just complaining endlessly about how boring it was. And I'm like, well, you know what, in hindsight, probably picked a good season to start with. But either way, that is going to be for Big Brother 12. Let's trek ever onward with our next champ, the affable Jordan Lloyd from Big Brother 11. Jordan Lloyd entered the house as a young waitress from North Carolina who was kind of just ready to hang out and have a fun summer on TV. Self-admittedly not the biggest strategist or tactician or a comp beast, she's best known for her just generally pleasant demeanor. How she's not someone who ruffles feathers or gets you to feel threatened about her presence. Jordan is a player often characterized by how unthreatening she is, and it's that trait that allows her to slip through the cracks on any given week. She is unassuming, disarming, and it's pretty easy to underestimate her capabilities. Upon entering the house, Jordan was split into a clique. This was a major overarching twist that impacted the first half of the season, where each player was selected by the producers to form a team. And if any one player on your team won HOH, the entire clique would be safe for the week. It was trying to mirror high school, that was the theme, and right away Jordan was placed in the popular clique, competing against the athletes, the brains, and the offbeats. To increase the stakes, the first HOH comp revealed that whichever clique won the comp, they would get a 4th player to join their clique, a mystery returning player from a previous season. And while we almost saw Jessica from Season 8, or Cowboy from Season 5, or Brian from Season 10, we ultimately saw the athletes pretty handily win the first comp, and Jessie from Season 10 the prior summer was brought back and made the first HOH of the season. The athletes were now the dominant faction out of the gate, and to buck the trend usually seen in high school, they instead teamed up with the Brains clique to pick off the offbeats and the populars. This meant that Jordan was now in trouble right away, but given that she was never viewed much as a threat, instead Lydia from the offbeats became the initial target. Jessie nominated Lydia and then Chima as a pawn to pretend to distance himself from the Brains group. In truth, Jessie and the athletes were working with the Brains, particularly with Chima and Ronnie, but they didn't want the rest of the house to know. And when I say the athletes clique, I really just mean Jessie, Natalie, and Russell. Their 4th member, Jeff, didn't vibe with his other 3 clique mates and was mostly excluded from the strategy talks. You could say they were being a bit cliquey. This left Jeff feeling on the outs. However, Jeff found solace in an attraction to Jordan. Jeff and Jordan began to flirt with each other in week 1 and formed a strong connection that would prove to be the most important relationship of the summer. Jordan leaned on Jeff for coordination and strategy, and Jeff was physically a good player who could win comps. Jeff was also considered likable, at least in the eyes of America, and given his status as the underdog amongst the rest of the powerful athletes, this positioned him and Jordan to be America's sweethearts.
I'm just like sitting back kind of watching like, he's hot with his shorts and the shirt off, you know, like a garden boy. When I first saw Jeff, I just thought he was a goober, kind of like all-American type guy. I thought he'd be stuck on himself.
That's why sometimes I just like to be alone, you know? But like then when you come in, I'm happier.
I wish everyone was more like Jordan. I wish everyone shared the same heart as Jordan. She just reassured me that there are good people out there.
If you had to be any animal, what would you be?
An eagle,
Why?
because they're cool and they fly.
I would be a squirrel.
You could be any animal in the whole world and you'd be a squirrel.
What's wrong with the squirrel? They hang out in neighborhoods and stuff.
A squirrel.
Jeff also wasn't the best tactician out there, nor was Jordan, but they did have a coalition of players forming around them in the first week. In truth, the athletes were annoyed with Jeff and how he wasn't working with them. They wanted to get Jeff out more than anyone, but they couldn't due to the clique twist giving Jeff safety. After the veto that Russell won, he got into a major fight with Jeff, which then brought Jordan into it too. And you know, Jordan could get loud too. Jeff and Jordan were able to recruit Michelle, Casey, Laura, Ronnie, and Brayden to their side, giving them a majority of 7 out of the 13, or 6 out of the 10 votes being cast. Russell used the veto to take down Lydia, and Jesse replaced her with Brayden, the next strongest guy after Jeff, who was close to Jeff. This was about as direct a shot at Jeff as Jesse could take, but the votes were in favor of Jeff and Jordan, so things should break their way. Until they didn't. Jeff, Jordan, and their whole lot were blindsided when one member of their group flipped to tie the vote, meaning Jesse could now evict Brayden in the tiebreaker. This outcome would set the stage for much of the rest of the season for Jordan, as she was now in the minority and had to basically sit and watch for weeks as her closest allies all got picked off. In week 2, Ronnie won HOH and nominated Jeff and Laura for eviction, revealing that he was the player who flipped his vote on Jordan's group. He betrayed Jeff and Jordan. Despite feeding them info from the other side throughout all of the first week, it was now clear where he stood given his nominations. Jeff did go on to win the veto and take himself off the block, but to drive home the point that Ronnie wasn't with them, he nominated Jordan in his place as a pawn, intending to get Laura evicted second. This will be a recurring trend for Jordan's game all season, as she'll go on to get nominated 4 different times, but she will never get evicted through any of them. Jordan is never the highest priority target in the house, ever. Not even in the final 3. Certainly not with 12 people in the game either. Laura is evicted with 8 of 9 votes. Jordan only receives a single vote from Natalie, who is trying to stir up trouble. Jesse then wins the 3rd HOH, his 2nd of the summer, and Jeff is now safe yet again. He nominates Jordan and Michelle and tells Jordan that she's just a pawn. The true target is Ronnie, the rat. Ronnie was very clearly playing both sides, and it was his time to go. But in reality, Jesse and his side of the house were gonna backdoor Casey, the next strongest player, working with Jeff and Jordan. Jeff and Jordan didn't know this, although they suspected something could be up, and man, they were losing allies left and right, and they couldn't do much about it. In week 4, Russell won HOH, but right before this, it was revealed the click twist was now over, meaning Jeff could be targeted even if an athlete won power. That said, Russell had enough of Ronnie's rat-like behavior and targeted him for eviction instead. And as per usual with the Big Brother 11 house, there was a lot of drama leading up to this point, but Jordan was mostly clear of it all, just kind of flirting with Jeff in the backyard or the have-not room, hoping for a miracle. And hey, what do you know? That's exactly what happened. A secret twist called the coup d'etat popped up back from season 7 in All Stars, and America was given the chance to vote for who they wanted to have it. They easily awarded it to Jeff, the biggest underdog of the season, who would also use it to help Jordan too. Jeff and Jordan were still America's sweethearts and were in a major bind after 4 weeks, and perhaps this power would help them a bit. In week 5, Chima was the HOH, and she was sick of Russell's antics, his animosity toward her. Chima and Russell had a contentious relationship that was less than friendly at times, and now Chima had the chance to get Russell out for good. Russell had slowly been drifting towards working with Jeff instead of going against him, especially after week 4 when Russell chose to not target Jeff against his allies' wishes. Chima nominated Lydia and Russell with the intent to get Russell out, and it seemed like this was certainly going to be the case after the veto was not used, but then at the live eviction, Jeff stood up and revealed he was given the secret power everyone was speculating about. Jeff had the power to dethrone the HOH and nominate 2 other players of his own choosing instead, and that's exactly what happened. Jeff took down Lydia and Russell and replaced them with Jesse and Natalie, his closest ally. Jesse was the clear target, and with 3 of the 5 votes to evict, with 1 of those votes coming from Jordan, Jesse was evicted just like that. The leader of the opposition in the house was removed from a secret twist, all thanks to America awarding Jeff for being popular with the fans. Not exactly the best gameplay, but you know what? Hey, that's Big Brother. Expect the unexpected. Jordan's game massively benefited from this. Her and Jeff gained Russell as an ally, and Jesse was now gone, the strongest player on the other side. To make matters even better for Jordan, her ally Michelle won HOH and targeted the remnants of Jesse's alliance with Chima and Natalie. Chima, however, didn't take too well to all of these events unfolding. Understandably, she was annoyed at Jeff for using the power, but even more so annoyed at the producers for introducing this power in the first place, let alone making it earned through a popularity vote. She was so annoyed by this outcome that she decided to stop playing the producer's game and instead began to get in their way. She put blankets on the cameras to block their view, she threw her microphone into the pool which destroyed them, and she stopped responding to production calls for her to go to the diary room. Chima was despondent, and after enough time had passed, the executive producer got on the intercom and called her in, and she obliged, and the producers decided to expel her from the game. Mind you, Jordan is all just kind of there through everything. She's just coasting along, has a group of allies who are winning stuff, and things are now falling her way. She is a number in an alliance, and that's pretty much it. Well, until the final 7, where she wins her first HOH of the season, her first comp of the season, and decides to take out either Lydia or Natalie. In the midst of this week, Kevin, who was somewhat in the middle of the two sides, though he wasn't really ever on Jordan's side, sold a lie to Jordan and Jeff about Russell wanting to get Jeff out next. Jordan believed Kevin's lie and almost backdoored Russell. She won the veto this week too. She held all the power, but decided to hold off and continue to remove Jesse's allies first. Lydia was evicted next, and then Jeff won HOH at the final 6, and things began to fall apart. Basically, Jeff and Jordan decided to work with Kevin and Natalie to reach the final 4. They believed Russell was turning against them, against Jeff, and figured he was their biggest competition anyway, so why not blindside him? Jeff nominated Kevin and Natalie as pawns, and after he won the veto, also holding all the power this week, similar to Jordan last week, he chose to take a shot at Russell and put him on the block. Russell was enraged, upset, pissed off, and it was all because of a lie. Mind you, Russell was likely Jeff's biggest threat down the line anyway, and with the numbers dwindling, I can see why getting Russell out could be a good idea. But it turned out to be a mistake. Russell was evicted 3-0, and Kevin won the final 5 HOH and immediately targeted Jeff for eviction. He told Jordan that Michelle was the target, but after Michelle won the veto, Kevin nominated Jordan next to Jeff, and the gig was up. The gig is always up. Jeff and Jordan had pressed their luck a little too much, relying on Kevin and Natalie to back them, and even then with Michelle now being safe, there really wasn't much they could do anyway. Jeff was evicted over Jordan, and Jordan was sad. Yeah, but on the upside, she was now in the final 4 and still not considered the biggest threat to win anyway, so who's to say this can't turn around? Natalie and Kevin wanted Michelle out next as they believed that she was a bigger threat than Jordan. After both Kevin and Natalie won the HOH and the veto, Michelle was evicted next to Jordan, where Jordan had now escaped the block 4 times. Going into the final 3, Kevin won the first part of the final HOH. Meanwhile, Jordan pulled off an upset and beat the remaining athlete in the house, Natalie, in part 2. She just had to defeat Kevin in part 3, and she was likely the winner. Her social game all season was decent. She had allies in the jury, she had Jeff, and she knew that Natalie wasn't all that popular anyway. I mean, hey, Jordan was the OG popular. How could she not be more popular than Natalie? In truth, Natalie had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way and was caught in this weird season-long love triangle between Jesse and Lydia, and now with Lydia and Jesse in the jury house, it turned out that Lydia didn't like Natalie and got Jesse to turn on Natalie too. Regardless though, Kevin has admitted, both on the feeds and post-season, that had he won part 3 of the final HOH, had he beaten Jordan in part 3, his plan was to evict Natalie and take Jordan to the final 2. I don't know for sure if Kevin wins that matchup. It's likely a 4-3 vote either way, but then hey, it's all speculation as Jordan pulls off the biggest upset of the season when she defeats Kevin in part 3 evicts him, and then goes on to beat Natalie in the final 2 by a final vote of 5-2. Because Chima was expelled, America was able to vote for the winner, and they easily gave it to Jordan, crowning her the winner of Big Brother 11.
Jeff's vote goes to... Congratulations, Jordan.
With Big Brother 12, we have Hayden Moss, one of the more dominant winners in the franchise's history. A contrast from Jordan in the previous year, Hayden was at the top of the pecking order within his alliance, and his alliance controlled the pace of the season from week 1 all the way to the finale. But unlike many other dominant winners, Hayden was a key cog in the machine that dictated the boot order more than just the sole manipulator dominating from the top. Hayden's alliance, the Brigade, were a strong team who equally worked in tandem, with Hayden contributing about as much as any other member. In a way, there are almost 4 variations of Hayden this season between the Brigade, but as we'll see, there are key differences that set him apart from the rest that result in him being the winner, and not any of them. Hayden was fresh out of college and entered the season as one of the most athletic guys in the cast. And out of the gate, he proved that by winning the first HOH of the season involving a team-based zipline comp, where his team let him be the first to wear the key. Unlike in the previous season, Big Brother 12 wasn't divided into any sort of groupings. Every player was there for themselves. But the new big twist of the summer was how one of the players out of the 13 was secretly working to sabotage the group. They would be trying to make the game tougher for everyone, serving as a production plant of sorts known as the Saboteur. The Saboteur's first act was to turn off the lights in the house, making it pitch black, and then locking the storage room door where all the food was. Really, the Saboteur was more of just like a prankster living in the house who didn't really have a vested interest in winning the season. They only needed to reach the halfway point, and then they would win a lot of money and just leave the game. This twist intended to create doubt amongst the players, not sure who they can trust, but well, as we're about to see, it ultimately flopped and made no difference to anyone's games, least of all Hayden's, except for one key point. By the end of the first day, late at night, Hayden was talking to a lot of the cast and feeling out who he might potentially want to work with. And between himself, Lane, Enzo, and Matt, the 4 of them were in the HOH room, and they all came to the decision to work together as a formal alliance. And this is what I'm talking about with the Saboteur. None of these players suspected each other of being the Saboteur, as they were all sitting next to one another on the sofa when the lights went out, and could confirm from the continuous banter the entire time that none of them were guilty. This established immediate trust, and thus the Brigade Alliance was formed. Each of the 4 of them had their role to play and were given nicknames like a corny action movie. Hayden was the animal, Lane was the beast, Matt was the brains, and Enzo was the meow meow. And Lane didn't even know what a brigade was. From here, the Brigade outlined their strategy over the first week and how they wanted to divide and conquer. Each of them would reach out to another player and bond with them, rope them in as a duo, and together the 4 Brigade men would become the center of the house, with each of their duo partners serving as votes to be controlled when it came time to vote, or as parachutes to be evicted in the event that they were ever nominated. For example, Hayden worked closely with a woman named Kristen. The 2 of them became a showmance, and so in the event that either of them were ever targeted, Kristen would be the one to get evicted over Hayden every day of the week. These players were the +1s to the Brigade. They would save each member if the block ever got hot. It also meant that they would have a lot of influence in the house between their 4 votes as an alliance, as well as potentially 4 more votes with their parachutes. Hayden roped in Kristen, Matt worked with Reagan, Lane flirted with Brittany, and Enzo kind of just had like a good social game where everyone loved him and never wanted him to get evicted. Enzo was the overseer who would later assist Hayden in bringing in Brendan into the fold, but for now was just mostly a goofy guy who tried to deflect the rest of the house from looking at the Brigade.
I got this gut feeling that these guys got my back. I am going to venture to say we're the strongest alliance in Big Brother history.
What's the name of the squad, the name of the team? Like, I thought the brigade. We're the brigade, bro. It's like, we're like the A-team.
And I have no clue what a brigade is.
Brendan and Rachel became a showmance right away, calling themselves Brenchel, bonding over their love of science. Next to Hayden, Brendan was the other most athletic man, and given Rachel was ruffling feathers with half the cast in the first few days, as well as the fact that several players believe Brendan could actually be the saboteur, Hayden decided to nominate both Brendan and Rachel in the first week. This duo became pariahs amidst the cast, and soon enough, a third player joined them, Annie, who Brendan was also flirting with before he began his showmance with Rachel. They had a trio going, and once Brendan won the first veto and used it on himself, Annie was put on the block next to Rachel. The brigade initially intended to split up Rachel and Brendan, but they wanted Brendan first, and now they couldn't get him. As the first week unfolded, they realized that Rachel was such a lightning rod for drama and attention that, you know what, if they kept her in the game, she would draw heat for each week that she was around, which meant the brigade could use her as a shield to eventually discard down the line. So instead, they rallied the house to evict Annie, where Annie was voted out in a unanimous 10-0 vote. And upon leaving the house as the first boot, it was revealed she was, in fact, the saboteur all along. And when I say all along, I mean 1 week. Which also meant the saboteur twist was now dead and we could resume our regularly scheduled programming of playing normal Big Brother. And I just gotta say as an aside that this was the first week I ever watched this show, and I thought that the saboteur twist was pretty damn cool, and it got me hooked into just keeping up with every episode. And when Annie was revealed to be the saboteur and got evicted, I kind of just sat there for a minute and went, well, what are we supposed to watch now? What's the point? Oh, how little did I know. Rachel won the second HOH of the season and had a bit of a mean girl situation with Brittany and Monet, and so Rachel targeted the two of them for eviction. Brittany won the veto and planned to use it on herself, and to build a bridge with Rachel and Brendan's showmance, Matt, the brains of the brigade, offered himself up as a pawn as like a courtesy to make Rachel's reign a little easier. She took him up on the offer, he was nominated next to Monet, and Monet was sent packing 7-2. Matt went on to win the third HOH in an endurance comp, and now the brigade were back in the HOH room, ready to plot and scheme from up high. The brigade were getting ready to finally split up Brendan and Rachel for good this time, feeling that they didn't really need to keep them around any longer, but Matt insisted the timing was just too early and they needed to wait a little longer. Matt instead cut a deal with Brenchel to guarantee their safety so long as they did the same thing with him going forward. They agreed, and so Matt targeted Andrew, a player who was kind of close to Brenchel and not affiliated with the brigade much at all. Brendan won the veto and decided not to use it to respect Matt's nominations, despite Andrew trying to get Brendan to use it on him. Andrew began to feel the heat this week and decided to exit the game guns blazing, lobbing grenades left and right. He first swore to the house that he was gunning for Brenchel and would follow through with getting them out if he were left in the game, but then also turned around on eviction night and called out another showmance. He called out Hayden and Kristen and wanted to alert the rest of the house to their duo as well. Everyone was so focused on Brenchel, but Hayden and Kristen were actually even bigger threats and needed to be considered too. This led to a bit of drama, and then Andrew was unanimously evicted right after. Going into the final 10, Hayden and the brigade were in great shape, in spite of Andrew trying to blow up Hayden's spot just moments prior. All four of them were still in the game, they all still had their parachute +1 duos, and Brenchel were still pariahs and the focus of most of the drama. Nobody was working with them or wanted to work with them, and unless they won HOH, they were in trouble. And then, of course, Rachel won the next HOH. Rachel also didn't get along with Kristen much, and given the ruckus that just ensued with Andrew, both she and Kristen got into one of the more iconic fights in the show's history. Rachel liked Hayden quite a bit and didn't hold any ill will toward him, but she did want Kristen out next, and so she nominated both Hayden and Kristen the next day. But this was exactly what Hayden was expecting and the brigade were hoping for. Hayden had a visible alliance with Kristen and a hidden one with his bros. And so Kristen was now going to be sacrificed for Hayden to stay in the game. When Brittany won the veto, Hayden and Kristen attempted to work with Brenchel to save the two of them and target Kathy instead. Kathy was the only unknown entity in the house who didn't really have allegiance to anyone, and she didn't really care much for Rachel as is, but if Hayden could get her out on Rachel's HOH, that would be the best outcome. Brittany was open to the idea of saving Hayden, The problem was that Rachel despised Kristen even more than Kathy, and when it came to replacement nominees, she realized Kathy was kind of a waste of a week. Without confirmation of what Rachel would do, potentially even nominating Lane next to Kristen to punish Brittany decided not to use the veto, and Kristen was now doomed. Hayden was completely safe, but he wasn't safe from his sad boy broken heart, as his showmance and his side piece was about to be evicted pre-jury. Kristen was evicted 6-1, with only Kathy voting for Hayden. Going into the jury phase and then the final 9, yet again the power ping-ponged back as Matt won the next HOH, creating a 4-week pattern of Matt and Rachel winning the key. Matt finally chose to indulge the rest of the brigade's wishes and target Brenchel, nominating them both for eviction. When Brittany won the veto again and chose not to use it again, it was now locked in place that Brenchel would finally be split up. They had served their use as a gigantic shield to distract from the brigade all summer, and now it was time for them to go. Rachel was the main target given her comp record, and she was evicted 6-0. However, knowing that Rachel was about to leave, both Hayden, who now didn't have a parachute alliance with Kristen evicted, decided to get closer to Brendan and bond with him. They had tried to work together the week that Rachel nominated Hayden, but now they actually had an in. To Brendan, Hayden was a lifeboat with Rachel about to leave. Matt was their new common enemy. Brendan wanted justice to avenge Rachel by evicting Matt, and Hayden played along with him. Enzo also joined in, and these 3 guys formed a new trio. It wasn't a real alliance to Hayden and Enzo, but it didn't really matter so long as Brendan was on board. And with Rachel evicted, Brendan then went into Mach 9 and won the next HOH. Huh, look at that. Perfect timing. Brendan nominated Lane and Reagan, desiring to backdoor Matt, and once Reagan won the veto, his plan was in place. Reagan took himself off the block, Matt was renominated next to Lane, and the brigade knew it was finally time to cut ties with Matt. Matt had built the best resume of the 4 of them up to this point, and was sometimes speculated by Hayden, Lane, and Enzo to be closer to Reagan than the brigade. Hayden was comfortable with cutting Matt, and since they now had no choice given he was next to Lane, a brigade member had to leave here, this was the perfect time. Except Matt had an ace up his sleeve. In the previous week, he had earned a secret power called the Diamond Power of Veto, which allowed him to take a nominee off the block and pick his own nominee on eviction night. And so when Brendan put Matt next to Lane, and the brigade sadly wiped their crocodile tears as they were ready to evict Matt, instead, Matt surprised everyone, took himself down, and nominated Kathy in his place. Kathy was the only player left in the game with no ties to the brigade, and so Matt deigned to remove her from the board. In truth, Matt was loyal to the brigade, and this move proved it. Matt liked his friendship with Reagan, but he prioritized the brigade first, even though the other 3 guys weren't so sure of that. Hayden, Lane, and Enzo had spent the week readying themselves to cut Matt. They were already accepting of his eviction and were strategically prepared to make it work for them going forward. So when Matt survived, this left them shocked. Matt was still loyal to the boys, but Hayden still wanted Matt out as soon as possible. Kathy was evicted over Lane, and Brittany won the next HOH, targeting Brendan for eviction. She nominated him and Enzo, but then Brendan won the veto, and the game continued to get dicey. Given that Lane was the closest player to Brittany all season, they had a flirtmance, and Lane had the most influence with Brittany, he encouraged her to cut Matt. Technically, Reagan was on the table too, but to the rest of the brigade, Matt was the biggest target and the best player, and they could do without him. Matt was put up next to Enzo, and this time he didn't have a secret power to save him, as the brigade evicted him 4-0. It was then revealed that the next round of the game would be a double eviction, a week of Big Brother in one night. And Hayden managed to win the next HOH. With no time to strategize, he went for the jugular on Brendan and nominated him alongside Reagan. Reagan went on to win the veto, take himself off the block, and so Hayden put up Brittany next to Brendan. Hayden had promised Brendan he was safe, but this was clearly not the case given the circumstances and Hayden's choices as HOH, and just like that, Hayden evicted Brendan in a 3-0 vote. Like ripping a band-aid off, it kinda hurt for a second to see Brendan get betrayed, but Then it was only for a few minutes, and that's better than an entire week. As you can probably tell, the Brigade, particularly Hayden, were always in control and in a comfortable spot pretty much every week. He was never seriously close to being evicted, and for the most part, he was covered no matter who won power. Lane won the next HOH at the final 5 and targeted Reagan. He nominated Enzo next to him, and when Enzo won the veto, Hayden was put up as the replacement so Lane could save face with Brittany. Hayden and Enzo were a little bit worried that Lane might prioritize Brittany over them. The two of them had bonded quite heavily as the season progressed, and Lane even admitted later on that he wanted to take Brittany to the final 2 if he could, but either way, Lane was still loyal to Hayden more than Reagan, and so Reagan was evicted at 2-0. The final hurdle was the final 4, except the bar was so low, and yeah, Hayden won the final 4 HOH against Enzo and Brittany. He also then won the veto and allowed Enzo to cast the sole vote to evict, where Enzo decidedly split up Lane and Brittany by choosing to evict Brittany. This would mean the Brigade would dominate the endgame, a member of the Alliance was guaranteed the win, and there was no temptation to change the narrative and let a non-member somehow reach the final 2 and potentially upend everything. And I guess I should probably end the season on this note that right before Brittany was evicted, Hayden, Lane, and Enzo brought Brittany into the HOH and spilled the beans to her about the Alliance and how she was kind of doomed. Brittany believed that there could have been a guys' alliance at various points in the season, but to have it confirmed was devastating to her. She was crushed, especially by Lane. But this was the ultimate goal of the Brigade, to make it this far together, and hey, there can only be one winner anyway. They lay low all season and distracted the rest of the cast with more visible bonds that didn't mean as much to any of them on a strategic level. They used Brenchel as a shield, they won all the comps that they needed to, and in the end, they dominated all the way from night 1 to the final night.
Final 3. Final 3 to Brigade. Best alliance ever, man. You believe that we could have made the final 3?
No. No, we're out week 2.
I still don't believe it, man.
Day 2.
Day 2.
We came together. All the chips are down. The entire game's riding on this one competition. Me versus Lane. If I can beat him, I got a good shot to win 500 G's.
Brittany was evicted, and later that night, Hayden emerged victorious from part 1 of the final HOH. Meanwhile, Lane defeated Enzo in part 2, and together, Hayden and Lane agreed to take each other to the final 2, believing Enzo had a strong social game where he didn't burn almost anyone all season and had a lot of jokes up his sleeve and could possibly beat either of them in front of the jury. Hayden won part 3 of the final HOH and chose to cut Enzo, leaving Enzo with a decade-long question of what could have been had he only reached the final 2 and had his chance to pitch to the jury. And in front of that jury, Hayden lapped Lane with his answers. Lane came off as unserious and aloof, kind of like he was playing a character. Meanwhile, Hayden spoke with conviction and owned his answers. There's actually quite a juxtaposition between the two of them. Hayden took it very seriously, and Lane was just kind of there. Hayden was seen as the most consistent player all season. He wasn't the leader, but he was strong in all facets of the game and excelled over his closest allies when it came down to the wire. In a close final vote, which is kind of fitting for the Brigade, Hayden received 4 votes to win over Lane's 3, crowning him the champion of Big Brother 12.
And the winner of Big Brother is... Congratulations, Hayden. You are the winner of Big Brother.
With Big Brother 13, the producers sought to bring a few familiar faces back into the mix from the past few seasons. Teased as having dynamic duos from seasons past, speculation arose that a returning player season was on the horizon. While we just saw Jesse return from BB10 into BB11, Big Brother 13 was looking to up the ante. However, the season began with 8 new faces entering the game first, and surprisingly they were paired up into duos out of the gate. Similar to Big Brother 9, the players would play the game as duos. They would be nominated as duos, but they would win competitions as individuals and vote as individuals. Only one would serve as HOH each week, and whoever won the veto and wanted to use it would have to save both players and take them off the block. And to make this even more convoluted and I guess interesting, if your partner was evicted, you would earn a golden key that would send you straight to the jury phase of the game. You were safe until jury. Huge stakes. Very convoluted. Why? Well, because the other 6 returning players entering the season were veterans, returning faces, where we saw Dick and Danielle return from Big Brother 8, Jeff and Jordan return from Big Brother 11, and Brendan and Rachel from Big Brother 12. Ah, I see. Protection to ensure that half the vets would at least make the jury. Very clever of you, producers. Rachel entered the season with perhaps the worst reputation of anyone. She was the most recent big name to come from the previous year, and she was best known for being a major antagonist who rubbed people the wrong way, was a lightning rod for drama, and could crush competitions like she was the next coming of Janelle. She wasn't really met with the warmest welcome, unlike Jeff and Jordan or even the Donatos, and it seemed like she might be in trouble right away. Well, that was until she did what she does best. She won the HOH comp and guaranteed herself safety for the first week. This enabled her to create inroads with the other players early as she held the power. Rachel benefited greatly from being a returning player as she entered the season with her boyfriend Brendan, also from Big Brother 12, as well as the other 4 veterans who all rallied around her. Dick laid out a plan to get them as far as they could. The veterans already had a built-in 6-person alliance, and they had the experience on their side. With this in mind, the veterans made a pact to stick together as long as possible. And so, Rachel nominated Portia and Keith for eviction, another duo, 2 newbies. Dick was leading the Vets Alliance in the first week, and he pulled Portia aside with a deal to have her work with the Veterans Alliance, and in return, they would grant her a golden key to get her to the 4th week of this season. The deal was honestly really good, and Portia took advantage of it. On the flip side, Keith was operating as a member of a counter alliance called the Regulators, with himself, Cassie, Dom, and Lawan. They were gonna try to oust the vets if they could, but could they? Rachel then won her 2nd comp of the season with the power of veto, granting her ultimate power for the week. She chose to leave the noms the same because they had their target right where they wanted him. With 10 votes on the table, Keith needed 6 to stay, and he believed that he had 6 of the other newbies in the game to save him. Portia would be a goner as the newbies rallied together to protect their numbers advantage. Except they didn't, because both Shelly and Kalia approached Rachel to cut a deal to work with her and the other vets, a similar deal to what Portia was offered. Basically, Shelly and Kalia, if need be, would go up on the block to sacrifice their partner to be granted a golden key. In a way, it almost sounds like a very on-the-nose and almost bizarro brigade strategy. The Vets Alliance took them up and began to use them when counting votes, meaning Rachel now had a massive voting block on her side each week. Instead of Keith staying with 6 votes, he was evicted with 6 votes when Shelly and Kalia flipped and Portia was saved. Rachel's alliance suffered a major loss, however, as halfway into the first week, Dick, the leader of the Vets Alliance, had to walk from the game due to a medical emergency. Dick was officially out of the game and wasn't returning, granting his daughter Danielle a golden key. She was now safe for 3 weeks, meaning if a regulator won HOH, there was a 50% chance that Rachel was going to be touching the block. This was a big setback for the vets, but on the flip side, she had gained 3 numbers with Portia, Shelly, and Kalia, so it ultimately proved to be a net positive and a good first week overall. Jordan went on to win the next HOH, and this proved great for Rachel's game. Her alliance was still in control, they could take out another regulator, what could go wrong? Well, a fair bit, as it turns out, largely thanks to Rachel. Rachel really didn't get along with Cassie and wanted her out, but Jordan preferred to target Dom, who was a bigger threat. Jordan nominated Dom and Adam. Rachel wasn't pleased when Jordan didn't listen to her. Rachel planned to use the veto if she won it against Jordan's wishes. And during the veto comp, she made a remark about Jeff and Jordan that upset them. Jeff got frustrated with Rachel's stubbornness, and this caused Rachel to break down and cry in a bush. Honestly, there's like a 50% chance I'm just making this stuff up as I go. Dom would go on to win the veto and take himself off the block, which meant that Jordan nominated Cassie and Shelly in the end anyway, and yeah, Cassie would go on to get unanimously evicted. But it should be said that after this veto debacle, Jeff and Jordan contemplated their alliance with Rachel and debated even nominating her to just get her evicted by week 2. They really did not care for Rachel's drama. But then Rachel does her thing, and she wins the 3rd HOH, and the drama continues. Before the nominations, there was a luxury comp, and Jordan won this comp and selected Jeff, Shelly, and Kalia to join her for a viewing of an episode of some random random TV show premiering on CBS. Rachel was ticked off that Jordan wouldn't take her and Brendan and instead picked their 2 fringe votes. With Rachel spurned, she decided to reach out and form another alliance with Danielle and Dom, who are now becoming a flirtmance and working together. Rachel did nominate Adam and Dom for eviction just to save face, but she secretly was being talked into backdooring Jeff and Jordan from Danielle. Danielle wanted to get rid of Jeff really badly. She just didn't get along with him all that well and realized that he was the biggest threat and the true leader of the vets. Danielle was amassing numbers with the newbies on her side, and she didn't want to deal with the vets much longer. Danielle got along better with the newbies, and so a veteran civil war was brewing from all sides. Rachel was considering backdooring Jeff now after he was thinking of backdooring her the previous week, and then to rally votes, Dom told Shelley about this plan, and everything came undone. Shelley was working especially close to Jeff and Jordan, and so when she heard this news about a potential backdoor, she ratted it to Jeff and Jordan, and this led to a major discussion between the 4 vets. Jeff and Jordan confronted Rachel and Brendan about the backdoor, and Rachel was shocked to hear them know about it. As it turned out, Dom spilled the beans to Shelley without Rachel knowing, and now that Jeff and Jordan knew, she felt most hurt by Dom and Danielle. She felt like she was being manipulated to make a wild move too early in the game, and Danielle was the biggest culprit because she was the vet. Dom was just a newbie. Brendan went on to win the veto, and given all of this commotion, he chose not to use it to get back at Dominic. A house meeting was held not long after, and they put Danielle and Dom on blast for their schemes, which led to a ton of drama with over half the house involved. And yeah, Dom was evicted third, with now 3 of the 4 regulators leaving back to back to back. The Golden Key twist ended at the start of week 4, and spurred on by the loss of Dominic, Danielle roughed it out to win the 4th HOH. This was absolutely the worst case scenario for Rachel. She had just evicted Danielle's closest ally after their alliance fell through, and now Brenchel was back to being target number 1 and 2, just like Big Brother 12 all over again. Danielle made a deal with Jeff and Jordan for 1 week of safety and swiftly nominated Brenchel. Rachel spent much of this week crying, depressed, feeling like she had no one other than Brendan. Brendan did go on to win the veto, meaning there was a slight chance they could get through, and Brendan even went so far as to not use the veto on himself, but instead use it on Rachel. Rachel was safe and made it to week 5. She just needed 3 more votes to save Brendan against Jordan, and she managed to retain Portia on her side, but the rest of the newbies were closer to Jeff and Jordan, and they sent Brendan packing instead. At the top of week 5, the players learned that there was a twist involving the next person to get evicted. Despite Rachel losing Brendan, the house was still mostly against Danielle, Kalia, and Portia, which meant that the HOH was lopsided in Rachel's favor. And then Kalia won HOH against all odds. Kalia was more Team Danielle than the rest of the vets and knew the 2 biggest targets in the house were Jeff and Rachel. And so yeah, she put both of them up and had them once again competing against each other. Jeff would go on to win the veto and take himself down, which normally would have meant that Jordan would go up next to Rachel, and more than likely Rachel gets evicted. But it's not always that simple, especially when the players know that a big twist is about to come into effect. Lawan had this idea that the person who would get evicted this week would actually likely get some kind of power instead of leaving the game. He decided to ask to get nominated, to take one for the team, ask Kalia to smooth it over with both Jeff and Jordan as well as Rachel, and hey, if Lawan went, he wasn't that big of a loss for Kalia anyway, and if he got a superpower, all the better. Lawan was unanimously evicted and did receive a superpower. The power to face off against Brendan in a competition to re-enter the game. To say Rachel was ecstatic would be an understatement. Brendan smoked Lawan in the comp, and just like that, Brenchel were back together again, and all was well. Until it wasn't, because yet again, against all odds, Danielle won the next HOH and was none too pleased to see Brenchel reunited. She was not working with Brendan and wanted him out yet again, so here we go. Let's repeat history. The plan was simple. Backdoor Brendan. Danielle nominated Adam and Shelley, 2 newbies, with the intent to reduce Brendan's chances to compete in the veto. Adam went on to win that veto, and just like that, Brendan was back on the block like a revolving door, and Rachel was just incredibly sad all over again. However, one major silver lining to this bad situation was that Brendan was at least going to be on the jury now instead of in the pre-jury watching Rachel slay from his sofa, which meant Rachel always had at least one jury vote ahead of anyone else. Revenge is a dish best served cold, as we saw the pendulum of power swing back the other way after Jeff won the next HOH at the final 8. While Jeff wasn't that close with Rachel, he was still working with her as veterans, and Rachel wasn't going anywhere after all that beef between Danielle and Jeff arose, with Danielle targeting the vets and Kalia nominating Jeff just a few weeks prior. Jeff wanted to backdoor Danielle, and so he nominated her two closest allies in Portia and Kalia, and then after Jeff won the veto in a similar situation to Brendan, Danielle was now up on the block and about to be evicted. The only problem was that the other newbies were starting to wisen up to the veterans and debated flipping the game on its head. Shelley was debating keeping Danielle in the game as a shield. Meanwhile, Portia preferred Danielle to stay over Kalia. Jordan and Rachel were ready to evict Danielle, and so the vote fell to Adam, who ultimately held more loyalty to those who protected him more through the game, that being Jeff and Jordan, unlike Danielle, who had nominated Adam in the previous week. Danielle was evicted in a very close 3-2 vote, and Rachel's biggest competition thus far was now out the door and on the jury. As it turned out, this same eviction was a double eviction, and the HOH was a trivia comp. After surviving the block, Kalia won the HOH and went back to her old ways of targeting the two biggest threats to win comps in the game, Jeff and Rachel. But Kalia wanted Jeff out more than Rachel, as Rachel had spent the past week, ever since Brendan was evicted, doing everything in her power to stay calm, clear her head, and just focus on reaching the end. For the first time in her Big Brother career, well, second, although Brendan did return, she was now permanently without Brendan in the game, and she had to wisen up. Rachel began to get along better with Jeff and Jordan. She began to get closer to Portia again. She worked with Adam to bring him closer to the vets, and really, she turned a new leaf at the right time. Her game up to this point was a bit of a hot mess, but seeing herself closer than ever to the endgame, she put her game face on and went for the kill. Portia won the veto after that infamous ball pit clown shoe event happened, where Jeff accidentally threw his clown shoe out of the pit. Had he realized what he had done here, he'd probably win this competition, but since he didn't and he couldn't find that shoe and he needed both of them to win the veto, he lost the veto and now he was in trouble. A big bout of drama erupted here as Jeff and Shelley came to blows about the vote. Portia wanted Jeff out, but Jordan clearly was voting for Rachel. This left Adam, who was closer to Jeff, then Rachel, and then Shelley, who was up to this point in the season also closer to Jeff than Rachel. Shelley actually didn't care much for Rachel all season. She didn't like Rachel's hysterics, and so you'd once again think that Rachel would have been in major trouble. I mean, what can you say? She just got unlucky with how the cookie crumbled and would likely now get evicted. But Shelley had a mind of her own, and after she voted to evict Kalia over Danielle while Jeff was HOH in the previous week, this series of events led to some major arguments. Basically, before Danielle got evicted at the top of the double eviction, Shelley got caught passing info and plotting against Jeff. And Jeff, of course, then got mad at Shelley for wanting to basically play her own game and not stay loyal to Jeff all season. Shelley wanted Jeff out eventually, and after this blowup, this was that time. Now we're in the double eviction, Jeff is on the block and he is very exposed, and Shelley voted to evict Jeff instead of Rachel, creating a 2-2 tie, meaning Kalia was the tiebreaker and she evicted Jeff. Rachel narrowly escaped by the skin of her teeth and was now in the final 6. Oh boy, the infamous final 6 of a BB13. Portia won the HOH and was still against the vets. The newbies had rallied together in the end to make the numbers 4v2. Portia, Kalia, Shelley, and Adam, who was sort of in the middle, willing to go either way, against Rachel and Jordan. Jordan was particularly upset with Kalia and Shelley after the double. Meanwhile, Rachel was just disappointed in her utter inability to win a comp. That was her bread and butter, and now she was facing eviction next to Jordan. They were surely gonna evict her over Jordan if she didn't win the veto. And then a twist popped up. Pandora's box, where Portia opened it and made the duo's twist return for the week. Yep. Pretty crazy twist to happen at this time, quite convenient. This meant that Portia and Kalia were now a duo, Adam and Shelley were a duo, and Rachel and Jordan were a duo. This also meant that if you won the veto and pulled yourself off the block, that your duo partner would also be saved. Okay, I see where this is going. Even more coincidental was how the veto comp was a return to form. It was the same comp as the first HOH of the season, a comp that Rachel won. Rachel was delighted to see this, and yeah, she easily won it against the rest of the house. Hanging on to a slippery banana was her bread and butter after all. Rachel saved herself, and Jordan and Now they controlled the votes for the week and easily evicted Shelly over Adam. The final 5 HOH was another physical comp where Rachel clearly had the advantage given Portia was sitting out. Beasting it out yet again, Rachel won the next HOH and guaranteed herself a spot in the final 4. Without hesitation, she nominated Portia and Kalia, and even though Adam won the veto, and you would think that he might use it to take out Jordan, Adam also held some loyalty to Jordan and believed that she was easier to beat in comps than either Portia or Kalia. He chose not to use it, and after the votes were cast, both Adam and Jordan let Rachel decide who was getting evicted as she broke the 1-1 tie to evict Kalia. Going into the final 4, Rachel had 2 close bonds with Jordan and Portia. While Portia was at times on the other side of the house and rooting against Rachel, by this point the past was in the past, and Portia recognized going into the final 3 with Adam and Jordan would be a bit of an uphill battle. Likewise, Adam won the next HOH and was now in the final 3. If Rachel or Jordan won the veto, they were gonna cut Portia, but Portia clutched it out yet again and won the final veto of this season. Portia did debate cutting Rachel as she was strong in comps, but the two of them made a deal where if Rachel won the final HOH, she would take Portia, and this helped Portia decide to evict Jordan. Jordan was also that likable, popular jury threat with not a lot of enemies, unlike Rachel. And just like that, Portia evicted Jordan and Rachel was in the final 3. Rachel was the biggest physical threat left of the 3, and she beat both Portia and Adam to win part 1. Meanwhile, Portia beat Adam in part 2, leaving the 2 ladies to face each other in part 3. Whether or not Portia would have evicted Rachel here to take Adam to the final 2 is a timeline that we'll never actually see, as Portia absolutely tanks part 3. Didn't get a single question right, meaning Rachel was a shoo-in for the final 2. Rachel stuck to her word, she evicted Adam in 3rd, took Portia to the final 2, and really, she didn't need to even say much in the jury Q&A because she already had Brendan, Jeff, and Jordan's votes on lock, meaning she just needed one more. Rachel did still plead her case, however, and ultimately it was the relationship she had managed to turn around with Shelly that made the difference. Shelly didn't care much for Portia either all season, but what she saw from Rachel was Rachel grow over the season and turn into a fierce and effective player who was worthy of a win. More than anything, Rachel evolved over the course of 2 seasons, back to back, into the player that she was meant to be, and her arc speaks for itself.
Walking through that front door, I've been one of the biggest targets in this game. I was on the block nominated 4 times and on the block 5 times. I made strategic decisions this entire game. I have fought my heart out. When Brendan left the game, I had to reformulate my game entirely. I won 4 HOHs, 2 POVs, considered options, stayed true to my alliance, and stayed true to what I thought would be strategic game moves for myself to further myself in this game.
Shelly voted for Rachel to give her that 4th vote, meaning by a final vote of 4-3, Rachel was crowned the winner of Big Brother 13.
Jordan's vote goes to... Congratulations, Rachel! You are the winner of Big Brother!
And that's it. If you made it this far, we are now past the halfway point of every winner in BB history thus far, and wow, I can't believe we're only halfway there. There is so much to talk about. So brace yourselves, and in the meantime, let me know what you think about these 3 winners and just the overall first half of Big Brother Champs. A big thanks to my patrons for all your support. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to not open Pandora's box on your way out of the HOH room, and I will see you in part 5 once I go cry into a bush. Again.
Couldn't find an H. Technotronics. Technotronic, Jeff?
Holy cow.
Come on, Cat. I'm watching Kathy gingerly opening bags like it's Christmas morning. I was like, go, go!
Enzo passing Kathy to Kristen, making her way out of the caramels. Kathy's still struggling.
Someone please explain to me how a sheriff can fight crime and cuff the bad guys, but can't crawl out of a pool of caramel.
Oh boy, Brittany literally just kicked Kathy in the head.
You know, and on top of all the other things that go with being a have-not, we have a saboteur in the house. That saboteur may be Kathy. I mean, there's no reason why she just kind of laid down and gave up.
If you fall, you are eliminated from the competition. Unless you are willing to accept 2 weeks of slop.
I scream out right away, do not take that slop pass because she has no chance in winning, and the last thing I want for her to go on slop for absolutely no reason, just to show that she has heart and she's a good competitor.
So the HOH isn't playing, then maybe we shouldn't be. But if the HOH isn't taking the slop, then why should we even be playing?
You can't be sick.
Well, why would...
I know. Baby, what... They very well could put us up if they wanted to. We'll start thinking about our game. But you need to keep all your emotions inside and you want...
That's why I'm hiding in the bushes.